Hi everybody, today we are going to use alcohol art markers and create this really sweet whimsical pumpkin house. I'm going to show you step by step. We're going to start with sketching and then coloring in the lightest values first, and then adding in the shadows, a little bit of highlight at the end with a jelly roll. So first I'm going to start by just showing you quickly some of the supplies, the color palette I picked out in case you're interested in following along with Ohuhu markers. Otherwise, use whatever brand of marker you have. It could even be water-based markers. It could even be Crayola, kids markers. You're not limited to the supplies you use, but in case you do want to try Ohuhu or have the same markers that I do, you'll be able to follow along very specifically. As a quick disclaimer, make sure to check the links below for any affiliate connections that I have to the supplies that I'm using. I'll make sure to disclose that in the description box. As you can see, I rendered this pumpkin house quite a few times in order to prepare for today's tutorial to find out what details I wanted in the image and what I do and don't like. And so today's tutorial is going to be a little bit of a morphing of all three of these practices that I did. And so I think it'll be really fun and hopefully turns out good. We're all in this together. I also want to mention that I have this particular video, which will be full length, complete tutorial, but then on my channel, I'll also have a time-lapse version that is quick, that you can just see the process really quickly to some music. And that way you don't have to watch the entire tutorial in length and detail if you just kind of want to see how the pumpkin house comes about. As I already mentioned, you can use any marker. The thing that I think would be important if you're using other supplies is to just make sure that the values, meaning the lights and darks, are similar to what I'm using. So for example, if I grab this, what is called the MG170 blue gray, you can see it's my darkest value in this illustration. So you will want to, get a value that's about that dark if you want the illustration to turn out the same. And the same, like when I grab a light, you'll want to make sure it's a light. The colors aren't as crucial as making sure that you're getting the values, especially if you want to preserve the idea that there's going to be light shining from the window and that there's going to be depth in the blueberries and in the grasses. And by the way, this example that I'm showing to you, I'm going to end up lightening the grass here. I wasn't thrilled with the fact that I went so dark on the grass. So I learned a few things as I practiced for you. And so we'll end up doing the grasses a little more like that in that sample there. So what I'm going to do is sketch freehand. I'm gonna step you through how I sketch, but it will be kind of up to you to eyeball it and to really just, put your own flavor and spin. Okay, so I want to start sketching. I'm going to freehand. Essentially, I'm going to be looking at my sample and sketching out what I see, and you can follow along freehand. And this is a really great exercise to develop your eye and your coordination with what you're seeing. So I will pop some helpful images up on the screen to help you sketch, but truthfully, your pumpkin house is going to turn out different than mine because we're freehanding it, we're not tracing, and you're gonna end up just creating this how you see it and how you're naturally inclined to create it. So because I want to fill the main part of the whole page with the pumpkin, and I guess I should mention the size that I'm using. Here I have a ruler. This book is 7.5 by 10. So I am going to just create me the guide for my pumpkin because I kind of want to come to as far to the edges as I can. There's not going to be a lot of detail on the side of the pumpkin house. So I've kind of got that guide in there, and then I'm gonna kind of guide my pathway. So when I erase, like sometimes I erase lines, sometimes I don't. It really just depends on if a line is bothering me. So, so that's my path. And then I'm gonna just draw some circles where these mushroom caps will go off to the side. Just to block them in, I'm gonna draw a circle that represents the big clump of blueberries here. I'm gonna do the same, like let's block in these blueberries. Then the actual top of the pumpkin here is gonna dip down a bit. So get rid of that line for now. And then I'm going to, what I found helpful because of this lantern, and also I wanna mention, I prefer this lantern. So let's work from this image. So what helped me was to block in the lantern first, because if I try to do the stem first, the lantern was ending up in weird places, weird composition. So there's where my lantern, actually I gotta lift it up again because there's gonna be a little bit of stem under that lantern. So let's put the lantern there. And then I see like the stem coming up and around. I'm gonna make this base of the stem here to go over the lantern, and then I'm going to come up and around. Now that looks not very graceful, so I'm going to take a moment and just refine that stem a little. Okay, I think that I have refined the stem enough. What I was looking for in that process was just making it thinner and more graceful and with a curve that pleased my eye. So nothing real in particular, but just kind of till I liked it. I also made sure that I had this part of the top of the pumpkin sketched in. And now I'm going to work on sketching out the door and the windows. So first for the door, in my different practices that I did, the doors each turned out different. And I actually really like this door. So I'm gonna be going for a little bit more like that. But I want it to be not too tall and skinny and not too short and stout. It needs to be just, you know, complementing to the shape of the pumpkin. I realize now I'm gonna have to move over the mushrooms. So I'm just gonna like erase part of the mushrooms for now. So then the stones around the door really do impact the shape. And sometimes I got the stones in there and I thought, oh no, now the door is too big and there's not enough window space. So there's a chance I will end up erasing the door. And so yeah, I do think I need to make that door a little smaller. And then I have more room for the stones. All right, I like that so far. So now I'm gonna block in window 1 and then window 2. Those are great, I like them. And then let's get back the mushroom placement. Okay, so now we have some grasses to sketch in here. So I've got 2 blades of grass. One's coming up the direction of the stem. And then one is, I'm gonna make it overlap because I ran out of room here, but one is kind of drooping down here. And then over here, we're gonna have some little curly Q fern type of fiddleheads. And then there's gonna be some grass blades coming here. This is the clump of blueberries. These are gonna be light grasses along the pathway, light grasses. Once again, these mushrooms have to move, so I'm gonna move them. Make one big one. I don't know, I'm struggling with the mushrooms today. Let me see why. Let's just have a look at my inspiration. Maybe I just need to change the shape and get some new inspiration. There we go. I like that button shape. Okay, that feels better. And then I'm gonna have a couple blades of grass coming from behind the mushroom. Okay, this is like sketch one. Now we start going over it again with the pencil and getting the details of the blueberries and the windows, the lantern. So let's get into those little details here. So I will start, let's see, with the door. We'll get that window in with the door and a nice little doorknob. And then I'm gonna do one big blueberry here. This bottom one I found was, this bottom clump is just nice as a big clump of 5. I like to use the rule of odds, having odd numbers. So I also put an odd number of leaves, and I'm gonna have a leaf come towards the door like that. Some of my decisions are simply because it pleases my eye. There's no real rhyme or reason, just pleases my eye. And then up here with this blueberry, I'll make sort of that part of the blueberry, the little star of the blueberry, I'll make it point up, and then I'll make this one point down. Once again, no rhyme or reason, just do what pleases you and have fun and play. And then this, actually I won't put a leaf there because I really appreciate this blade of grass and like its form, so I don't want to totally cover it, but I will bring a leaf there, and I will bring a leaf partially covering that part of the stem. Now we'll fill in the windows. Now I give a little illusion with this window sort of facing that way because the pumpkin's round and I want to give it form. So I make it kind of like an inside. This should actually be shaded a little darker there. But I make sort of like an inside area that shows a bit of the window depth on that side. And then I flip it so that the window depth is showing on the other side. And I simply do that to give the illusion that it's a rounded window. So we'll come in there, or a rounded pumpkin. And then kind of give it a little crisscross. I'm not too particular with filling in all the lines of the crisscross because the light is shining through and would illuminate and maybe passively even make some of that crisscross disappear in the brightness of the light. So I just get it softly, and you'll see when I ink over it, I just sort of dot in the line. And then, let's see, I'm skipping the broom. I felt like that got too busy for me. Let's just sketch in the rock steps. One more step. And I bring the steps out a little wider because they're coming towards you. So each time I make a step, it gets a little wider, following like the lines that we made for the path. And then now let's sketch in that lantern. So the lantern that I like the best is this one. I'll put a zoomed in image up on the screen and you can just kind of follow along right now. I will just sketch it in and you can follow what I put on the screen. Okay, I had to improvise my lantern. It didn't have enough room. It was gonna hit the stem. So I just took off the bottom part of the lantern there, following my, previous practice. So I've got the first sketch done. And so my next step is gonna be taking an ink pen that is 0.7, and I'm going to put in some pretty strong definitive lines in different aspects of the sketch so that I can erase some of the pencil. I don't have to erase all of the pencil, but I just want the definitive strong lines to be here. And also the ink provides a shadow in some areas. For example, the insides of the stone, the deeper contours of the stem, of the blueberries. So I'm going to ink next. I'm going to start with a 0.7, which will give us just a little bit thicker of a line. And I'm going to accentuate first the top of the pumpkin here. A lot of this will get covered in the darks of our markers, and the ink won't be too visible. But what it's going to allow me to do is erase the pencil lines and still have a guide. I'm going over the grass blades. I'll pop a little detail in there. I'm going to go over the stem here, and you can see that I do a broken line a lot of times, mostly so I can lift my hand up and see what I'm doing. But a broken line also just has like a little bit of a stylistic flair there. Now I hadn't penciled in all of these little grooves of the stem, so I am freehanding them with the ink. And I'm proficient enough with illustrating that I can do that, but if that makes you nervous, then that would have been a step with the pencil. You can stop this, you can go back with the pencil and give yourself the pencil lines that you're happy with. But I do end up improvising as I go with the ink, and I actually feel like I'm better with the ink than the pencil. I have more confidence with the ink, but I always give the pencil as a guideline. Now I'm gonna do the lantern with a smaller pen, just because it is such a fine detailed little element of the illustration. I will go into the darkest areas of the lantern and just give a thicker line, but I'm gonna leave it for now and come back to that with a finer pen. And then I'm not too worried about making sure that I hit every single pencil line exactly how it is. I use the pencil as a guide and then let my ink pen dance and do its own thing. Now, when I do these stones around the door, I don't want to just trace every single stone perfectly in the ink. I'm really just going to create little markings that tell me where the stone is, and then later I will make the stones more definitive with the markers. Maybe once in a while I'll do a full stone, but I'm thinking in terms of the shadows of the stone and really getting the pen and the ink into the groove of where the shadows will go, but trying not to make like a perfect outline of the stone. I am putting a little cross hatching into the depth of the window just because I forgot to do it on a couple of my practice runs, and I always think to myself, I'll come back and do that cross hatching later, and I don't. So I'm just gonna do it now, and it'll be done. And it's okay if, like, you can see I kind of went wonky here, a little bit wonky with the crisscross of my window, and it's okay. This is a whimsy pumpkin house, and it can have some wonkiness. That's just fine. Even these steps, you know, if your line goes a little wiggly when you're kind of making these steps, that's okay. It's a whimsy house. And I'm just gonna give like a bit of a scribble to show where that path would be. Now later I might come in and do like strengthen some of the lines of the pumpkin, but that will probably be done with the deep red marker. But so for now, I will just grab my smaller ink pen and do the fine details of this little lantern. And then I'm gonna get erasing. Okay, so just mention here, the reason that I'm using one of these pliable artist erasers is because I had previously been using just a regular eraser, which sometimes does the trick, but on this particular paper, with the particular pencil that I was using, it was leaving, that other eraser was leaving really undesirable streaks and graphite marks, and I was frustrated. So I switched out to this pliable eraser. So there we go. There is our ink and most of the pencil lines erased, and we can start using our markers and fill in this whimsy pumpkin. Hey, my good microphone stopped working for about 5 minutes, so it's gonna get a bit echoey around here, but don't worry, the good mic will be back soon. Let's get coloring. Sometimes I call it painting when I am coloring with alcohol markers. I feel like it's very similar to painting, and so I often interchange those words. This is my pumpkin house palette. All of these colors are in the description box, and I'm going to start with the lightest. I take a watercolor approach when I'm using markers, which is working lightest values to darkest. Although, with that being said, I do hop around as inspiration calls me. So there isn't always a rhyme or reason to what catches my eye and what I do. But I'm gonna start with essentially the bright lights, which will be the fluorescent yellow, the fluorescent orange, and the cream color, and probably a bit of the light gray, the lightest cool gray as well, but I'll see. And so the first thing I'm gonna do is just kind of like tackle the under painting of the pumpkin. So I'll do the brightest orange and the fluorescent in the window. And I use the chisel edge for this, which is very much like painting. So I also always do the strokes of the marker in the contour and form in which I'm creating. So for the pumpkin, it's rounded, so you'll see that my markings are all elongated and rounded in the form that the pumpkin will be. And so that's just kind of like something to keep your eye on. When I get to the stones and like around those stone areas of around the door, I'm gonna flip the chisel to the smallest edge of the chisel and just kind of carve into those a little bit. around the windows, because we want to have this fluorescent yellow, I'm not going to get too close to the windows. I'm going to leave some space as if it's blended, and I kind of wiggle my marker around so that it's not like one solid line. As I develop my techniques with the markers further, I may blend or transition colors differently, but for now this is, you know, the transition that I've been doing and I like it for now, so leave it at that. Underneath, I'm still thinking of it being a pumpkin under there, but I probably went too far. The pumpkin probably would have stopped about here, so that's okay. I will end up covering that with some greens and some other colors, and no one will know the difference. Okay, so I've done the underneath coat, I guess, or layer of the brightest light, the under orange of the pumpkin, and now I'm going to go in with this fluorescent yellow and create the glow surrounding the window. And I don't cover every bit of paper because I let the white of the paper also be light, much like a watercolor technique. There is going to be some other yellows that enhance the windowsills and frames, but that for now kind of blocks in the yellow. As well, while I'm at it, I will just put a slight glow around this lantern because I know that that will be there. Anywhere else I have that light? Yes, I have it here. There we go. Okay, so then I'll work on some more lightest colors. Now, the lightest color in the door is going to be that gray I mentioned. So I'm gonna do in the same, I guess, wood panel, like vertical wood panels, I'm gonna use the chisel edge and create panels of light wood. And I'm not covering the entire door because I do want some of the other colors to not have the gray underneath it. And then actually, while I'm at it with this gray, I am going to put some of this gray into the stones. When I color in the stones, I don't color all of them. And so I leave bits showing through that I can have other grays and other colors in there. Essentially, I really don't always cover everything with any color or marker. I like to leave pieces of the paper and other colors showing through. So that, I forgot these stones down here. But once these stones are done, that concludes these light colors. And let's move on to the lightest green in the stem, which actually is not even a green. The lightest color in the stem is a yellowy, it's called barium yellow. And I am gonna cover everything here. It's gonna become the base of the other greens. Through some play and experimentation, I discovered they look really nice. Barium yellow looks really nice with greens layered on top. And I'm gonna do that underside as well. I also like barium yellow on the lantern because it appears to be like golden, sort of not bronze, but like, you know, a metallic look once it's all completed. Maybe I'll even kind of do that little hook. There we go. Okay, so now I guess looking, I'm gonna, while I've got this color out, I'm gonna do the stems of the mushrooms. This becomes like the base of the stem. Anywhere else, I think that's good. Now switching to the lightest color in the mushroom, on the caps, it is the milk tea, and I'm just gonna cover the base of the cap with the milk tea, but I am leaving some white paper through some little flecks. They kind of appear as highlights and texture. And I'm going to bring that milk tea down a bit as if it's shadowing underneath the cap. Let's see here. We're still on the lights, so I'm going to grab back to the cream color. So cream color on the chisel edge. I'm going to cover in the path with cream color. It becomes the lightest area of stone. And then I'm actually gonna dance that cream color up a little bit onto these stones. The cream mixed with the gray, I really like it. So I'm gonna just sort of dance that around there. I'm looking for anywhere else. I think that's good. And then still looking for the light. So let's move on to light green. And so the lightest greens are going to be I'm leaving the tips of some of the blades of grasses, this lightest green. So I'll go in and I'll just like cover all of this space with the lightest green. But in order to differentiate these grasses from the blueberry leaves so that they're not all the same colors, I am going to use a different shade of green, more of a blue green on the blueberry leaves. So this is more of the base just for the grasses. It's okay to go outside the lines of my ink. And I'm not going onto these grasses yet because those I'm gonna go more of a like yellow. I'll put it in some fluorescent, I think, into there, which I didn't think of when I had the fluorescent yellow out. Now, as I near the edge of the illustration, I'm just dotting and getting more sparse as if it's like mossy and separated. I definitely went out of the lines there, and that's okay. Sort of put flecks in behind. And then sparse towards the edges like it's moss. Now I'm going to switch out here real quick to the fluorescent yellow again, just because I wanted to get light color in these grassy areas that are closest to the path. So I'm going to dot in the light there, but then bounce right back to the yellow green. And with the fine tip, I'll just put some texture into those little grasses. Maybe we'll come back with even a darker green later. So now let's do these. I'm switching it up from my sample where I am going to use this yellow green as the base of these blades. It's okay if you cross into the blueberries a little because the blueberry is going to be such a dark marker that it will cover and blend nicely with the green. So I'm not too worried about sort of like crossing that line. All right, now let's block in with color the green that's specifically for the blueberry, which I'm gonna grab a tester just to make sure, a tester piece of paper, just to make sure here that I got the right color, because I feel like I'm missing a color here. Okay, that one. So we're gonna use pale green for the lightest color of the blueberry leaves. Okay, now I'm going to switch over to the bronze green. This is the dark one. We're going to add some shadow into the blades of grass, kind of down where the sun wouldn't shine so much in there. This whole underneath area of that blade, like there would be a shadow from the blade, and then there would be another bit of a shadow around the blueberries. Kind of be like that. And then I'm going to use this in the depth of the stem. Now this pale green, you'll notice it even gets darker because when it's mixed on top of that barium yellow. Now I'm switching to the pale green, the lighter one, to just add some light green. I'm still letting the barium yellow show through on that stem. Okay, now I'm feeling inspired to fill in the blueberries with the lightest shade of blue, which is still a very dark blue. It's going to be, in fact, it's called blue gray. So we're gonna do that, and then the darker version of blue gray is going to be its shadow. Just looking, let's do some lighter. I'm just trying to cover the whole thing with the first passover of lights. So let's go. I like a little bit of this turquoise blue to just brighten the door, but I don't want the whole door to look totally turquoise. So I just dot in a little bit, and then I think we've covered it for a passover of light colors. I will just trace over these little fiddle heads, and while I've got this light green out, I'll just make some blades of grass coming through. And then I'm gonna just do the little dotted leaves of these fiddle heads. Okay, let's start adding in some darks, and this is where I feel like the flat image, the 2D, just sort of begins to take form and come towards us, and I love this part of the process. So I'm grabbing my vermilion, and I'm going to just begin to bring in depth into the darker areas of the pumpkin, which will be everything that dips and recedes away from us, and leaving flecks of the fluorescent around the edges as if it's a glow. And of course we want it to be glowing around the window for sure. And I'm leaving little bits of the fluorescent as if it's, you know, the highlights of the pumpkin. This dark color kind of goes everywhere where the leaves would be touching, creating shadow, and down here where the grasses and mushrooms would create shadow, but I dance around with the marker so that little flecks of the bright shows through. I'm going to switch it out for the fine tip here and do a few of these kind of finer markings. Already, I just love seeing that depth and form of the pumpkin. And then I will go in with, let's do the blueberries. So we're using the darker version of the blue-gray, and I'm going anywhere where the blueberries would be overlapping, that would be further towards the bottom of the berry. Now this also can make the stars of the blueberries. So on any of the blueberries, like a couple of my blueberries facing outwards have the stars pointing out, but these ones, for instance, the star would need to be somewhere. And so I just use that to indicate that. And then I'm gonna also use this blue-gray to create the deepest, darkest parts of the pumpkin stem, mixed with the green that's already on there. It's gonna create like a very dark blue-green, and it's gonna become one of our darkest darks. But you can see it's just like starting to totally pop out, and I guess the lantern would be casting a glow there, and that's something I didn't think about. But there would probably have been some light there, which I could go back in later when I use the gel pen and just kind of create some highlights there with the gel pen. So now let's do some darker colors in the door. And so I'm going to use the same blue series, but it's gonna be the lighter of the gray blues. So we're gonna use the lighter of the gray blues for the door. We've already put some turquoise on the door. We've already put a little gray on the door. So now the lighter of the gray blues, and then we're gonna go darker into the grooves by the stones. So this kind of like lighter gray blue, but it is still a mid-tone on our illustration, is becoming what will be perceived as the main color of the door. And there should actually be some light shining through there. So I'm gonna stop it with that color there because the light would be coming down more like this. Okay, so I'm always, we're always thinking about the lights and the darks and where everything's hitting. So I feel good about this. One thing I noticed is I didn't put the ink lines of the door yet, so we'll make sure we do that at the end. And now I'm gonna switch and start doing some of the darks using the fine tip, the darkest blue-gray, and I'm gonna get into the grooves of the stones coming against the door. I'm gonna really deepen those shadows. Okay, I'm just like looking for anywhere else I need to darken with this blue-gray. I think we're doing pretty good. So now I'm gonna look here and see, where do we want to take a little bit darker? Let's move to the darks of the mushroom and the window casings. So with my fine tip of the color From Dust, I'm going to dance around on these window casings and the crisscross without coloring everything in, because We want that fluorescent yellow to look like it's illuminating the casing, but we also want to give some structure to it. Okay, using the chiseled edge, I'm going to bring some of this into the mushroom cap. Mostly going around the edges to create like form, as if it's curling and moving away from us. All right, eh? And this brown color, we're still using From Dust. I think I can get a little bit of just texture and base to under these blueberries, as if something's anchoring them, and you know, they're kind of receding into the grass a little. So I'm going to use it to sort of shadow here, and then use flecks of this to create a bit of a mossy feel. I don't want to go too dark in this grass, because in my sample here I did, and I regretted it. We're getting somewhere. So now I feel like I want to use my gray series, and I want to gray some shadows in. For example, I use the gray on the greens of the blueberry leaves as the shadow. So when you put this gray, the cool gray, it's the medium one that I've chosen, when I put it over top of the pale green color that we're using for the blueberry leaves, and I put it into like closest to the blueberry or around the edges, it makes a really nice shadow here. I do like using grays to blend and make shadows, so I might even spot the gray around here and there. It won't be as dark as our darkest blue gray. I'm kind of using it as a shadow blender. And actually I'm gonna gray out some of the bottom part of the orange with this. I should say the orange of the pumpkin, because you can see as I went over that in there, it had a nice blend and a nice like color mixture to create a shadow down towards the bottom of the pumpkin. So I'm going to use it to like sort of create a casted shadow here and there. It's amazing what some gray will do. I'll bring some gray out. Some gray grasses as texture. I'm avoiding all this light area. And then I might actually gray some of the edge of my mushrooms. And we'll do a little bit of a blend there too. I'm gonna go just kind of create more of an edge for this blade. I didn't mean to do that. It's okay, don't panic when you make a mistake. All right, so I'm loving this so far. Now let's grab this. So we did the path in just a smooth layer of the cream color. Now I'm going to use the chisel edge of the milk tea and just kind of create some stone looking shapes. Technically they should get a little smaller as they move towards the door up the path, and bigger as they move towards us. And I kind of made that with the milk tea, and then taking the shade darker from Dust, I'm going to use the fine tip to go in and make this, follow the squiggles and make a deeper recession as if it's like between some rocks, a little bit of gravel or something between the rocks. And I kind of dot using my fine tip. And let's go and put some texture some other places, although I'm not crazy about this brown color. So I'll just use it sparingly to bring some continuity in. But I'm gonna switch and make some texture with gray on these rocks here. So one thing I just noticed as I was doing this is, so I'm using the darkest cool gray that we've chosen. And one thing that I've noticed, actually I'm using the medium cool gray, is that I haven't made the deep recession around the outside of the stones yet. So let's go and do that with, let's get into even some darker darks. So I've chosen a couple darker darks, and I'm gonna just work my way up, and I should clarify, darker dark reds. And I want to just work my way up without overdoing it. So this one is called Coral Red. I'm gonna use the fine tip, and you might not even notice much of a difference, but there will be a subtle difference to me. And I'm getting in there with the Coral Red and just deepening the groove that would go around these stones. Actually, I'm really happy with that, and I might not even go a shade darker, because what I found is the darker and darker I got on some of my practices and samples, I didn't like how it shifted the color. So I thought, I'm gonna go a little easier when I do the tutorial. So this is the coral, and I'm deepening the groove that would be there. And then I'm also gonna deepen in those shadowy areas. Now, if it's a little too red for your liking, when I say red, like the reddish orange underneath the blueberry, we can just take one of the grays and gray it. I call it graying it out, but I gray out the shadows a bit under there. Maybe I need to go one shade darker. And it just tones down the saturation. Might be hard to tell on the video, but it has toned it down so that it's not bright where the shadows are, because shadows are duller and not bright. So, and I'm going to shadow this a bit more. So to wrap this illustration up, I still want to go over it with my ink pen a little bit more, and some what I call embellishment colors. So embellishment colors aren't necessarily part of my palette, but they're just little peekaboo colors like this, these little spots of pink, little red, brighter red, door handle, and then I use my ink pens and my jelly roll to create other dynamics and little flourishes. So we'll move into that part of the illustration now. I will start with the 0.7 ink, and what I'm going to be doing is just like, I guess, whatever inspires me. Lines, a little bit of cross hatching, what I call scribble art, where I kind of get into, like, I'll demonstrate down here. When I get into the grasses, I'll literally just do scribbles to create depth and texture. And so, yeah, I'll be kind of just dancing around with my ink pen. When something is round, I usually follow those rounded edges, and I always try to not overdo the ink. So I'm kind of always reining myself in a little. I'm going and reinforcing areas that I feel are weak and needs a little bit more stability or definition. I had left out the door wooden slats of the door, and that makes a big difference to put that in there. Some textures in the stones. Maybe I'll actually make some markings in the grass that look like leaves. What I do to one side, I mimic on the other side to bring continuity. I like to make some little dots and markings here and there. Brings personality. And I'm really liking what I see. I don't know that I need to do too much more with the ink pen, and I don't even know that I need to use the finest one for much. But what I am gonna do is make some highlights with the jelly roll, but first I'm gonna finish this lantern. So the concept here with using the pink is that maybe it's a little flower bloom that's on the top of the lantern. So I used the pink, and then I'm gonna go in with the coral, and technically this is called a pale purple, but it sure looks pink. And I'm gonna go in with the coral and make some depth there. It also helps to tie it into the pumpkin house a little bit. And then I just like to spot around the pink. I'm calling it pink, but it's pale purple. I like to add a little bit with the chiseled edge to the mushrooms. I like to make a little peekaboo here and there in the grasses, because, like, who knows, maybe there's a little bloom or a little, maybe not that many butterflies, but it alludes to just life. I find pink always brings life. And yeah, I'm gonna kind of leave it at that. I don't want to overdo it. I'm gonna finish up just a few tiny little details and give you a close-up of our beautiful, whimsical little pumpkin house.